Hello again, everyone. Welcome to the latest edition of The Opening Bell with Alex and Matt, back talking about all the things in the weird, wacky and wonderful world of boxing. My goodness me, you could go away for a few days and suddenly the planet has been transformed. And that's what it felt like pretty much in the last 6 to 7 days, because we recorded last Tuesday morning. And then the Wednesday papers come out with the strapline, "The billion-dollar bout for boxing's future." That was courtesy of Gordon Rayner in the Telegraph, and a very snazzy fight card with the stats of Frank Warren versus Dana White pitted side by side. So remarkable stuff there. And then we get other fights that are being made. He said, they said. My goodness me, Matt, the gifts from the sporting gods just keep going you journalists' way.
It was an insane few days. I mean, you kind of have to go back to what we were talking about last week, and it kind of all started with the news that Conor Benn was going to join up with Dana White and Zuffa Boxing, leaving Matchroom, and then it just kept snowballing. The news just kept snowballing, and yeah, there's a point last week where you're like looking at your phone thinking, oh my gosh, what's going to have happened now? And there was that silly thing going on. I don't know if you were aware of it, because I know you were away last week or towards the end of last week. But there was something just that was so annoying with everybody on Twitter going, oh, you're not going to... You thought that was big. Wait till you get the next bit of news. Something huge is about to drop. And you're just like, shut up. Just shut up. Either break the news if you know it, or shut up. But then I think everybody thought it was quite funny to get involved even when they didn't know what was going on. And eventually then, at the end of the week, you had Alexander Usyk versus Kickboxer, which was going to be for the WBC title. No, it wasn't going to be for the WBC title. Actually, yes, it is going to be for the WBC title. And yeah, it was crazy. I think even by boxing standards, which can spew out utter nonsense. I can't recall another week like what we've just experienced.
Mad, absolutely mad. And then, of course, in and around that, and bigger than that, you've got what's going on with America and Iran. It was absolutely nuts the last week or so. And so it goes on. Let's deal with them one by one, shall we? Because obviously the big and more immediate one, I think, for us in the UK and Europe, and Britain in particular, Britain and Ireland, is the Frank Warren letters before action being sent to SELA, which is basically one of the kind of arms of the Saudi Entertainment Authority, and TKO, and therefore Zuffa and Dana White. The intent to sue for breach of contract, linked to that is the idea, the suggestion, the accusation that both TKO and the Saudis were given a glimpse into the boxing business through the eyes and through the workings of Queensberry, access to their data, etc. And then, lo and behold, further down the line, they go on to sign their own contract. So we're going to find out, Matt, exactly how all of that really looks in terms of the letters and the contracts. But what do we know so far? Sort of pitch this for us. Put us into the light as much as you can.
Well, I think we know. I mean, by now this feels like old news, and it wasn't that long ago, was it? It was less than a week ago, but it does feel pretty old now. But yeah, there's the kind of, it's twofold, the action that Queensberry are taking against TKO and Turki Al-Sheikh, effectively, and the Turki Al-Sheikh, if the reports are correct, and if what Queensberry are alleging is correct, is that they were given an exclusive deal to be their lone promoter. So even if fights were taking place under the Saudi umbrella that did not include Queensberry fighters, or maybe they didn't even include one Queensberry fighter, Queensberry would essentially manage that event, which is what they were doing for a while. And during that period, there was certain information that they had shared with TKO. And since TKO aka Zuffa Boxing, have now been announced as the exclusive partner of Seller and Turkey Al Sheikh, that Queensberry have taken action. And I think if you kind of trace back to when the cracks started to appear, I think you can go all the way back to the end of 2024, start of 2025 with this. And you just have to look at the semantics. You just have to look at the narrative. You just have to look at, all of a sudden, Turkey Al Sheikh is no longer being referred to as His Excellency. He's being referred to as Turkey. So this has been brewing for a little while. And I think if anybody knows Frank Warren's history in the sport, when he believes he has been wronged, he will come out fighting. And for a man in his 70s, he's got an enormous set of balls, to be perfectly honest, and he will take them out and he will swing them in the face of anybody. He doesn't care. He is out there now to get what he believes is rightfully his. And I would be surprised if this went as far as a courtroom. But I think, really, reading between the lines, knowing Frank Warren's history, knowing people at Queensberry, what they'll be hoping for here is not necessarily the $1 billion, which is the headline number in this lawsuit, but a healthy few million to be handed over out of court, and that's good business.
There were one or two side shows, Matt, alongside this, and effectively it will feel a bit like nitpicking. In a legal sense, it probably is, although there could be sort of further ramifications. But there was quite a tasty, fairly childish Ring Magazine tweet that went out as well. You'll have seen that. You'll have covered it. Suspect probably libelous. I would venture to suggest. Again, for those that haven't seen it, or just sort of pick up the baton on that one.
Everybody will have seen it, Alex. Everybody that listens to this will have seen it. It was insane what they were suggesting. It was 100% libelous. There was a lawsuit in pretty much every paragraph, and there was about 6 paragraphs. It was incredible. I mean, it starts off by suggesting that Queensberry's finances are in jeopardy, that Queensberry as a business is struggling. Now, we don't know what Queensberry's accounts were in 2025, but we'll find out in a couple of months. What we do know is what they were in 2024. It's one of the healthiest years Queensberry has had for a long time. So they're going against what is a matter of public record by saying that they are struggling financially. And then, of course, you had the most ridiculous thing that everybody picked up on. The amount of quote tweets that were picking up on this should highlight the utter insanity and naivety of whoever demanded that tweet go live. And that was that the ticket sales for Fabio Wardley versus Daniel Dubois were disappointing. Well, I suppose you could argue they're disappointed at that point because they hadn't even gone on sale yet. So yes, they were at zero at that point because no bugger could buy one at that point because they hadn't gone on sale. They were still going to go on. They were due to go on sale 2 days later. That alone is incredible. Now, the rest of it, I think you could argue would have been conjecture, in that the suggestions that certain fighters at Queensberry are looking to leave. There were suggestions about how Queensberry do their business behind the scenes. The word rumor has it, or the rumors are, was used 2 or 3 times in there, as if that is almost kind of a get out of jail free card should there be any legal action. That's not how it works. Had this been one of those mad tweets from pictureless Joe Blogs or whatever, you'd kind of be like, oh, whatever. This was a tweet that came out on the official Ring Magazine social media account. Ring Magazine, established 1923, like to call themselves the Bible of boxing. I've long loved the Ring Magazine, but with that one social media post, their reputation, what was left of it anyway, was flushed down the toilet in my eyes. And I think the people, I know a lot of people that work there, a lot of people I get on with. I would imagine when they saw that come out, they'd have been cringing. They'd have been. I can just imagine how you'd feel when something like that came out, and that should give you an indication of where the order came from to post that, because it's insane to me that there isn't anybody within that organisation that can't turn around and say, I'm with respect, we cannot post this. And it illustrates that there isn't anybody within that organisation with the power to do that, or has the respect from the people that own it to stand up and do that. Or there's an element of fear in that they just think, well, what's the point? But that, for me, I think was the most surprising thing. And it was astonishing when it was posted. And what was even more surprising to me was the next morning, and it was still there. That was incredible. And it's now my understanding, I've spoken to a few people, it's now my understanding that there will be another lawsuit on top of the existing one that we've been talking about, heading its way to the Ring magazine.
And I think what that showed, first on two counts, Matt, what that tweet showed, first of all, that tweet wasn't written by a journalist, I don't think. And it didn't sound like an English-speaking journalist to my eye and to my ear. Now, that doesn't matter, that shouldn't matter, but it might just hint at where it came from a little more directly, I think, because the language that was used, the tone of it, the nature of it, everything pointed to someone who didn't necessarily know what they were doing. And that's besides just the content of it. I'm just talking about just technically and otherwise. So that was the first thing. But more important, and it's the wider point that we made several years ago, Matt, and that is the very real fear that any sense that the Ring magazine, when it was purchased and changed ownership, whether it would be remotely possible for it to retain an independent voice. And we feared that was unlikely. I don't think any of us could have expected it to look and sound like this and to get to this point. Even in your worst nightmares, did you not expect it to look and sound like this? So I'm afraid independent voice, rational analysis, all of that has left the building. It has gone, and seemingly gone forever.
Perhaps. I mean, for as long as they stick around. I mean, look, the Ring magazine, it had almost kind of ceased to exist prior to Turki Al Sheikh coming in. I think that they were not printing a magazine, a physical magazine anyway. They were still visible online and on their social media channels. There was still a digital edition being published. But the biggest selling point of the Ring is their championship. So it was always my belief that that they were essentially buying the Ring legacy, the Ring championship, the Rocky Balboa belt.
And you're also buying a brand, Matt, which was respected across not just the boxing landscape, but the sporting world. It was a respected brand. And therefore, if you have that brand, whether it's just a logo on a tweet or whatever, then you're supposed to get that balance, that ballast and that authority that comes with all of those years of hard-earned respect. That's what goes with it as well. And clearly, that's bogus. Clearly, it doesn't exist.
No, and I think you can say that about a lot of publications, and I'm not just talking about boxing. I'm talking about a lot of publications. But I'm struggling to think of one publication where it has kind of done a complete about turn. And the Ring, but let's also be honest here. The ring's history is a little bit checkered. There was the 1970s rating scandal and everything else. There was the ownership from Golden Boy, where they're then being accused of favouring Golden Boy fighters. It hasn't been regarded as a completely independent title for quite some time, in all honesty. But it does stand for something. I think people of a certain age will remember reading the Ring magazine when they were younger. They will remember looking at the Ring ratings and believing that they were the real ratings, the only ratings you could really trust. And that has all changed now. That has all changed. But it's, as I say, you look at boxing media as a whole, and I think the thing that bothers me the most is what bothered me 12 months ago or whatever, is that the Ring magazine, or it'll be at a Ring event, and they, even though they're supposedly all about free speech and journalism as it should be, will not allow certain other outlets into their event because they may have written something that they didn't like in the past, because it wasn't all positivity. And if that's the way they're going to play it, then I've got absolutely zero time for the Ring anymore.
Is this Frank Warren's retirement fund? Are we talking tens of millions? Or are we talking hundreds?
I suspect tens. Should be a nice little sum, to be honest. I suspect tens, but I don't know. I mean, I'm just really guessing. But I'd again from speaking to certain people since that tweet came out, there was initially a desire to respond to it because some of the claims in there, if people don't know any better, could be deemed as quite damaging. So there was initially, the reaction was to respond to it. And then within minutes and seeing the responses that were all there, the decision was made that no, we let that nonsense speak for itself. It's doing its job for us. There's no response we can make to that will make us look any better. And now I believe that the Queensberry are not there. It's kind of no comment on any kind of lawsuits now. These particular lawsuits. It's no comment. It's all out there for everyone to see. I don't think they need to do anything else or say anything, because it is just. It has boosted Queensberry and Frank Warren's reputation in the industry, and it has severely damaged those that are on the other side.
But if you are in the Turkey Al Sheikh, TKO, Dana White, Zuffa business, isn't it a case of mission accomplished anyway? Whether it was simply a fact of getting a glimpse into the contracts so that they then had an idea of how they were going to go about it themselves, or whether access to the Queensberry data was important for, and business know-how and boxing knowledge was important to how Sela and TKO Zuffa were going to go about the initial stages of their partnership together and their move into the boxing business. So that maybe that's worth tens of millions. It almost certainly is, isn't it?
Yeah, you'd think so. And it really comes down to, there does appear to be a long-term plan for Zuffa. It depends how much longer there will be funded in their mission to take over boxing. I know they've got a very, very healthy deal with Paramount, which is bringing in something like $8 million a month for them. And then they will obviously be funded as well by Turkey Al Sheikh. So we see. And then, all of this that I said earlier, where I'm like, this has ruined their reputation. I suppose I'm speaking personally, and you have to be realistic about the world at large now, don't you? I will never forget that tweet. As a journalist, I will never forget the unprofessionalism of that tweet. But people on the street may have seen it, had an opinion on it, and they've forgotten about it by now. So it really does depend now what Zuffa do inside the ring, what the fights that they make and how they conduct themselves now. Because if they want to take over the sport, if that is the mission, they want to take over the sport, they want to almost be a commission, a sanctioning body, a promoter, manager, matchmaker, all in one, then they really need to appear like the very best in all of those facets. So they need to get their commissioning on point, drug testing, etc. They need to make sure the rankings are on point and there's not a hint of corruption or favoritism about them. And they need to be making fights which is the best versus the best. And if they do that, then people will very quickly radiate towards them. If they don't, then given all of the promises they've made, the egg on their face will be impossible to shift.
And there are sort of wider power plays ongoing, which I sort of hint at here in the pod from time to time, particularly regarding American media, the links between those media execs or people who in American politics are on the board of some of those media outlets. And the links are quite crucial, I think, for how the next stages of this Zuffa plan take shape. There's no question about that. You've got the Ali Destruction Act in the background as well. I'm going to call it that because that's what I view it as. Others will just call it the Ali Reform Act or whatever. But I saw that Netflix have pulled out of a potential purchase of some of the sort of big American brands that include kind of CBS and CNN, MTV, TCM, DC, HBO, Showtime, TNT, for what it's worth as well. And Paramount are kind of in pole position for that. We've already got the Paramount link to TKO and Zuffa. We know that Paramount is linked to the highest American office as well. So the power plays that are ongoing that you might not necessarily think really affect us and our sport, the truth is they absolutely are going to over in the stateside. And you've got to kind of keep your eye on some of the related news lines, haven't you, Matt? And that sort of media one stateside right now is quite interesting, just bubbling away beneath the surface.
It's really interesting. Yeah, I was looking at that over the weekend. And kind of on the surface, you'd think that if we're kind of just gonna talk about boxing, there's very, very good news indeed for the people at Zuffa Boxing.
And so I said on Twitter a couple of days ago, people sort of had a conversation about the influence of the Saudis, blah, 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 TKO and Zuffa. And I said that the battleground for this is going to be won on TV or around streaming. That's where this battleground will be won and lost. And therefore, it is a concern for me, I think, just in a neutral sense, that Sky are aligning themselves or perhaps looking to align or possibly aligning themselves with TKO and Zuffa going forward. Because ultimately, the fact that they're looking that way, if you're Eddie and Frank, you know, the moment you've got DAZN, but really the power brokers are the streamers and the TV execs. And if you don't have that, you have nowhere to go for your boxing business. Nowhere. So it will be won and lost there. And if I'm in the Eddie and Frank business, I'll be slightly concerned about that.
Yeah, I think so. But then, I mean, this does feel big, this whole movement. And I think if you try not to read between the lines too much and just read the battle statement almost, or the game plan for Zuffa Boxing, and that is one champion per division, reducing the amount of weight classes, ensuring that every fight is evenly matched, then you can understand why that should appeal to an awful lot of people. However, we have seen people come into the sport with grand ideas, with seemingly bottomless pockets, that simply have found the landscape far too cluttered to do exactly what they want to do. And as I kind of alluded to before, just because there is now a Zuffa championship and they will be shouting very, very loudly that is the championship that all the boxers want, the WBC, the IBF, the WBA, the WBO, and all of them, they're not just going to go scurrying off into the shadows and disappear. And if you have that, so you essentially, what they're almost creating is and it's been said a lot in the boxing media, boxing is at war. It is creating kind of a situation where war is developing. And on the one hand, you will have Turki Al Sheikh, Zuffa, Sella, all of those, which are essentially really the same thing. And then on the other, you will have everything else. And I think if you're just going to simply say that Zuffa and co have won, given the finances that they've got at their disposal, then I think you're underestimating everybody else. Because what you may have is a situation where, and I'm not saying for 1 second that Eddie Hearn, Oscar De La Hoya, Bob Arum, Frank Warren are going to join and create one company, but I think each of them will be acutely aware that their best hope at the moment is to work with each other. And if you've got all of those other things operating on, let's say, DAZN, so everything else is on DAZN and you've just got Zuffa, you could end up with a sport that almost feels like two sports. And frankly, given the amount of boxers that are out there and the amount of fights that can be made, both of them will hopefully be producing really, really good stuff. Now, it's far from an ideal scenario. You should know, and everybody who listens to this should know, that for the way for the sport to move forward is everybody to unite with the same goal of what they want, and that's to make the sport better. And how do we do that? That is not going to happen. These battle lines that have been drawn over the last fortnight are almost indelible now. But we wait and see. We wait and see what happens. None of this is causing me to lose sleep. I'm fascinated by it on a daily basis. And I think positively, everybody now is going to be so desperate to make their product look the best that there should be no excuse now for poor matchmaking, poor products, ludicrous broadcasting times. Everybody has got to be on point now, and I think we'll see that.
But what this short-term chaos does create, Matt, is either a mindset, and I'm talking about individual promoters, or I'm talking about sanctioning bodies. And either individually, they think, this is every man for themselves now. I have got to look out for me, or they think about working together. And you have to say that the WBC's approach to Usyk against Verhoeven, the WBC's mind-changing and ultimate decision-making, that smacks a little bit of self-determination more than anything else. We don't want to be frozen out of this, so we're better inside the enemy camp than we are watching in from the gates. That is what it smacks of.
Without question. Without question, and that was why. That's I'm convinced that's the reason behind the about turn. There was a statement saying, no, this won't be a WBC heavyweight title fight, and then the following day they said, actually, after careful consideration, we will be sticking it on there. They want visibility, and that I think is something that means more to Mauricio than almost anything else. Is that visibility, that attachment to the big events, even when they couldn't justify sticking a world title on the line for certain fights, they will still create a belt so that they're there and they're visible and they're always in the photographs. And I think that is the case here. However, I also believe, and if I was suddenly employed by the WBC, my advice to them would be, you now have an opportunity to stand tall as the best sanctioning body in existence. Do everything by the book. Do everything right, and shout about that. So don't shout about the fact that you're going to that you're going to sanction a fight between Alexander Usyk, one of the best heavyweights in history, and a complete novice. No, you shout about the fact that you are not going to sanction that. And there's an open goal for someone at the moment, and I don't think it's going to be the WBC, given what we've seen over the last few days. And with this whole thing is that Alexander Usyk was in Bangkok in December with his representatives asking if he could have a voluntary defence, and it was carefully considered by the WBC. And at that point, there were negotiations with Deontay Wilder. Mauricio Suleiman was on the stage and he said, we've given this consideration. Given that it's going to be Deontay Wilder, we will allow you to have a voluntary defence. And even then I was thinking, yeah, but what on earth has Deontay Wilder done to deserve it? And you've got Ajit Kabayal there,
And there's obvious hypocrisy on the part of the WBC, isn't there? Because Fury did fight Ngannou, but not for a world title. It's only 2 or 3 weeks ago that Maurizio was saying that Usyk should fight Cabiel. He said that publicly. So there's been hypocrisy within the space of a few days, but a lot of it within the space of weeks, and going back to that December convention out in Bangkok, as you said, as well, over the course of months. Matt, in a way, no one can criticize Usyk. We can criticize the WBC. Was it more a fear of being on the outside looking in? Is there a possibility, if they didn't sanction it, that might have led to a bigger rift with Usyk? And I'm looking at the bigger picture here, because there's been so much chat, hasn't there, that maybe Usyk was going to be one of these guys that was leaving boxing to go over to Zuffa boxing as well. So in a sense, I'm almost certain it's Maurizio's vanity, essentially, that is at play here. His absolute desire to be at the heart of it, the WBC to always be at the heart of it. It's always a vanity project for him, as much as he loves the sport. But could you say that essentially that there was any way at play the idea that the sport didn't want to risk losing Usyk?
100%. 100%. And I think that, you say what you like about Maurizio. I think his heart is in the right place, but I think he makes some wacky decisions, really, really spur of the moment, not thinking about the long-term repercussions. And I think that is his fault. And he can be persuaded and he can be seduced by fighters, particularly influential fighters. And I think he will be acutely aware that in December, Terence Crawford just got on his soapbox and unleashed at the WBC about their sanctioning fees. Terence Crawford at the time was still active. He retired a few days after that, but he was still active at the time. And the consensus choice is the best fighter in the sport. So when you got the best fighter in the sport saying that, then that's not a good look for you when you're the WBC. The following month, in February, Shakur Stevenson came out and said very, very similar things. Now, Stevenson is not quite of the profile of Terence Crawford, but I think plenty will agree that he has the potential to do so that in 3 or 4 years' time, Stevenson might well be the number one fighter in the sport, and he has already made it very, very clear that he doesn't want to work with the WBC again. And if there was a danger that Alexander Usyk was going to do something similar, then yeah, absolutely, they will be opening their arms and saying, yeah, what do you need? What do you need? You please don't go against us, because it would be dreadful PR. But I stand by what I said. The best PR in these situations, in this unpredictable world of boxing, is to be consistent, is to have boundaries, and to say we're doing the right thing. It doesn't matter who you are. And that is how you generate respect. Not just in boxing, in life.
Absolutely. And not always easy to do. Not always easy to do. So Usyk against Rico Verhoeven, he had 36-year-old multiple kickboxing champion. He's going to be trained by Peter Fury, I think, isn't he? So there's a bit of good heavyweight experience in his corner. But he's had one fight, and that was a decade ago, Matt, well into his 30s, against one of the best to ever lace it up. So apart from being a big guy who might be able to punch, and let's not forget, kickboxers have a respectable record in the sport, don't they? Vitali, most famously, Marco Huck, also to an extent as well. But yeah, besides being a big man and big men can punch, he's got absolutely no chance.
He's got absolutely no chance. And kind of going over and reading more about him in the last few days, is that word from kickboxing, from kickboxing aficionados, is he's brilliant, but he hasn't really got a punch. So then you kind of thinking, well, what chance does he have? Yeah, he's with Peter Fury. He's been with Peter Fury for a number of years. Actually, he's sparred with people like Tyson Fury in the past. He will obviously be able to box. This isn't hauling some novice off the street. He will obviously be able to box. But to kind of come in at the level of Alexander Usyk is incredible. I mean, if he was to come in at the level of someone like Jared Anderson, you'd be thinking, you've got no chance, mate. But to come in at the level of Alexander Usyk is a ginormous leap. And again, this, I think, was Turki Al-Sheikh's idea. He kind of loves this kind of nonsense. And although a lot of what Turki Al-Sheikh has done in his short time in boxing is to be greatly applauded, this kind of stuff just smacks of naivety. It really does. Oh, what happens if we match Godzilla with King Kong? What happens? It's childlike, and
have them fight on a London bus. Yeah,
exactly. I just wish there was no place for it in this sport. But this is probably the only sport where you can get away with this kind of stuff. You know, you couldn't come in and match the best football team with the best rugby team and think anybody would take it seriously. But in boxing, yeah, anything goes.
And so tying up those news lines with a fight not quite like Usyk Verhoeven, but Opetaia Glanton this weekend. Not quite a similar mismatch, but a mismatch nonetheless, isn't it? And the fight that is going to kickstart Zuffa titles. What are you expecting from how this looks? And I don't think I really need to ask you what you expect of the matchup and the result.
I'm surprised that this is the fight they've decided to. That they said, this is going to be this is the first fight where the Zuffa Championship will be on the line. I think in their defence, and it's my understanding that they go by the ring rankings, that Glanton is a number 10 in the cruiserweight rankings. I wouldn't put him anywhere near the top 10. But he is coming off a win over Marcus Brown, I think. But before that, he was handily beaten by Chris Billam-Smith. But what I think, if you're looking purely at the optics and what we will say about it this time next week, I think they might get away with it. Because Glanton will come to fight, and therefore it may appear exciting for a while because Glanton will give it a good go, and it might be over in 3 rounds, but Glanton will give it a go for as long as he lasts. So they may get away with it. But really, if this is kind of your opening statement of we are here to take over the sport and get rid of all those dirty sanctioning bodies, and this is the fight that they're making, then it's they've still got a bit of work to do. And I think that, and kind of going back to someone like the WBC, if the WBC had mandated this back in December, there would have been a lot more criticism than Zuffa are currently getting.
Indeed. And actually, we love Opetaia, don't we? As an athlete, as a boxer, as a talent, we love him. But I tell you what, you look through the last 3 years of his career, he has had a rum run, hasn't he?
That's and a half, yeah.
He's had a rum run of not getting into the ring with anyone, really.
And I think for that reason, I think if you was to ask me someone that's overrated in the sport, I'd say Opetaia. Because we simply don't know how good he is yet, because he hasn't really fought the opponents. And on the odd occasion he has, he's gone 12 rounds and he's had a really tough fight. So kind of there is kind of the certain people within the sport that want Opetaia to move to heavyweight, and he's going to be the person to dethrone Alexander Usyk. But just look carefully at his record. I'm not saying he's not capable, and I'm not saying he hasn't got all the potential in the world, and I'm not saying that he will come unstuck when he takes that step up. But yeah, this is someone who is regarded as one of the best fighters in the sport, and he has been fighting the most undeserving of foes, by and large.
Yeah, and he had absolute huff and puff with Bradis, didn't he? So he looks the business. He looks really talented, but how good is he? And we've not had any of the answers to that because he's just not been matched appropriate to his title and to his abilities, in truth. That is the absolute truth of it. Other matches that have been made, the Fury Makhmudov bill is taking shape on April the 11th. And Conor Benn is going to be co-feature on that, fighting Regis Prograis, which 5 years ago, Prograis would have spanked the living bejesus out of Conor Benn. But the current version of Prograis, easy to hit, particularly in the pocket. Do you know, I didn't see this match coming, but actually, as matches go, if you were in the Conor Benn business, I think it's a tremendous match for Conor Benn. A tremendous match. And yeah, fair play. Because we were talking last week, weren't we, Matt, and the week before about, you know, as soon as he goes up in class, Conor Benn, he's going to lose. He is going to lose. But tell you what, they've scratched around and found a really good name with a backstory and talent. He'll come to have a fight. So, yeah, fair play to whoever dreamed that one up. They've done their job.
They've done their job if there wasn't such hype around Conor Benn, and Conor Benn hadn't been saying he's the most invincible man on earth for the last 3 months. Because this to me suggests that the people that are now in the Conor Benn business are as aware of his limitations as the people that were previously in the Conor Benn business. This isn't the show-stopping test that we were promised. This isn't Ryan Garcia. This isn't Shakur Stevenson. It's Regis Prograis, who's never fought in a division as high as this. I think he's going to be a catch weight of 150 pounds. He's struggled. I think we spoke on the podcast about his last fight, which although he won it, we were like, all the signs are there of a war-torn fighter. And you just think that, really, although Regis Prograis was once exceptionally capable, once one of the tidiest and most elegant boxers of them all, that he is being roasted and fed to Conor Benn here. And
dished up, yeah.
And the thing.
But by the way, Matt, he'd be happy to be dished up, and he won't view it like that. We're at a distance, and we're viewing it through neutral eyes. He won't feel like that. He'll feel this is a phenomenal opportunity, and hopefully he's getting paid a right few quid for it as well. But yeah, you take a step back and you look at the bigger picture. For sure, he's been served up.
Oh, he is. And you look at it from Conor Benn's point of view as well, and you just think, crikey, why wouldn't he sign that deal if these are the kind of fights he's going to get? Talk about kind of, you know, being on easy street. And it sounds like I'm being really, really disrespectful to Regis Prograis. Not. I like him as a person, long admired him as a boxer, but this is that kind of really, really cruel matchmaking that we see far too often in the sport of boxing, But there was people saying, wow, 15 million for that. Now we know that 15 million is the reported signing on fee, and it's a kind of a one fight deal. What we don't know is what is really within that deal and what options Conor Benn has. What was the handshake? What was the handshake deal? What's the thank you for joining us fee and everything else? So this won't be a one fight only deal for Conor Benn, and he's going to get 15 million. I think even with all the money that they've supposedly got, that would be an insane amount of money to pay for one fight at this level on an undercard, which is essentially filler for Netflix. So they've got another really, really recognisable name on that bill. But, you know, it would have been ballsy matchmaking if they'd have made it back in 2022 before they came up with the master plan of matching him with Chris Eubank Jr. and before he started failing tests. It would have been really ballsy matchmaking back then. But now it does appear that they've, as you say, they're feeding Prograis to him.
Yeah, they served him up. There's no doubt. And we love Prograis. We love everything about Prograis. Love him as a person, love his attitude. He's a key feature in Donald McRae's book, The Last Bell, isn't he? And he's just I think he's a top man, good human being. He's been a terrific fighter to watch. But he's right at the end. And it's for those of us who love boxers and love boxing, it's a horrible place to be. To watch through that prism is not nice. And when you can see it and you know what's around the corner, it's even less nice, for sure. So, yeah, we're feeling that. And we don't even have to go in there and get hit and hurt. But that's what he wants to do, and that's what's unfolding for sure. And Chris Eubank, Ben's old foe, is going to go in against Berlanga. That's potentially a tough fight for him, isn't it? Berlanga's no star, but he's probably a bit fresher. He's pretty tough, reliable. He'll come and have a go. He's genuinely be fighting up at super middle as well. So Berlanga taking on Eubank. Who's got the better end of that deal?
Well, I can't get this confirmed. He's kind of just suddenly appeared on the all over social media yesterday. So whether this is actually negotiations, whether this is actually a possibility, I'd pick Berlanga all day long in that fight. I would pick Berlanga all day long, purely on the evidence of what we've seen from Eubank Jr. And I've been doing a lot of research into Eubank Jr. I've been looking at his fights, and I think you go back and you look at what he's been doing since really about 2019, 2020, and he's been slowly declining with every outing. And we saw the extent of that decline, which I think was accelerated by torturous contract clauses where he had to be a certain weight and what have you. And what was left of him in November was a shell of who he used to be. And when you see a fighter fight like that, it is, I can't even think of an example of anybody that has then looked brand new in their next outing. Trying to think of one off the top of my head. I can't think of one.
No, absolutely. So we'll follow that story. And in the same sort of sentence, when you're looking at sort of matches, good matches or bad matches or whatever, easy to talk about those a little removed when you're not involved. But Fraser Clark against Justice Hooney, again on the April 11th Fury bill. Fraser Clark, who last time we saw him almost sleepwalking his way through that British title fight against Jamie TKV. Now, in truth, if he can't beat TKV, he cannot beat Hooney. Can't. He was fighting through a cold, reportedly not himself. I think naturally, Matt, you wonder how much the Wardley fights have taken out of him in the long amateur career. I think that's probably forefront in your mind. But theoretically, there could have been an excuse for the TKV fight night, which by Clark's own standards was a bad night at the office.
It was a really bad night, and it wasn't. He didn't look anything like Eubank Jr. looked. So I'm not necessarily saying that all the evidence is there that he's shot to pieces. But given his age, like you say, he's had a long old road in this sport, and don't think for one second that the amateur career doesn't put miles on the clock, it does. But I suppose that on paper, it would appear that this might be a winnable fight for Fraser Clarke if you don't subscribe to the notion that he is damaged goods, and that if it was just an off night against Jamie TKV, then this becomes a winnable fight, and all of a sudden, Fraser Clarke is right back in the picture. I think the only comfort here is that who is actually looking after Fraser Clarke now, who is training him, and that's Joe Gallagher. And you would think that Joe Gallagher has looked at this and gone, yep, we can do this. He's been working with Fraser Clarke for a while now, and he will have been working with him day to day. And I'm sure that if he thought that Fraser Clarke was shot to bits and had no chance of going forward in the sport, that he wouldn't be working with him, and he wouldn't want any part of this fight. I'm not now saying that I think Fraser Clarke will look as good as new. I'm not saying that, but you kind of have to put some trust into people that know the situation far better than you do.
Yeah, interesting. Good point. Fair enough. I got something right last week. Tipped up Ursu to beat Owen Cooper, of course. Ursu just a little too good. But you just never bet against Navarrete. If you can't learn from your mistakes, you're not going to do anything. Navarrete beating Nunes 7-4. The bet of the weekend goes in, Matt. He's unbelievable, Navarrete, isn't he? I mean, he walks in his own shoes. He's got his own style. He does his own thing. And it sometimes looks a bit funky, but my goodness me, he is so effective. He is so difficult to beat on his night. And Nunes found that out quite painfully.
He did, and I was wrong again. I'm going through a really bad run at the moment. Yeah, I mean, Navarrete just does what Navarrete does. And Eric Raskin, actually, there's a article going live. One of his columns is going live today on the Boxing Scene website, where it's a belated appreciation of Navarrete, because he too has been picking against him for years, picking holes in his style, and he now saying, look, we need to stand back and appreciate this guy, because he's very, very, very likely going to end up in the Hall of Fame, given everything that he has achieved and continues to do. And when I was watching it at the weekend, it just brought Brandon Figueroa to mind. In that you look at these fighters and you just think they can't carry on. They can't keep winning with that style. And they do. And as you say, there's something about Navarrete where I would say once you're in the ring with him and you've done all the homework in the world, thinking, well, all I need to do is this, and then I need to do that. And I need to feint here, and then I'm going to come up and catch him with that. It all goes out the window. He's an incredible fighter.
Yeah. Very, very effective. I think it must be his art. I mean, he's slightly unique and unconventional stylistically anyway, isn't he? But I think his arms, they're almost as long as his legs. And I just think,
yeah.
I genuinely think the length of his arms, just fighters think they're out of distance, or they think they're going to reach him, and they just get pecked and peppered. And, it's some of the punches he throws, he'll throw an uppercut from a mile away, no problem. And he'll get there as well. Left hook always seems to find a home for that from round the houses. I mean, he's a unique boxer. He really is. It shouldn't work, but it really does. And I don't think Nunes' tactics really helped him. Boxing off the back foot for the first 4 rounds. I don't really know what the ploy was there. And then he tried to fight. And to be honest, Navarrete can do what Amir Khan never could. And that's tall fighter who can fight on the inside, and even despite those long arms, he'll beat you up on the inside as well. So he's an absolute fruitster, Navarrete. I learned to stop betting against him a good while ago. It took me a few times. Valdez was painful in particular, but yeah, it's going to take someone slick like a Shakur or, that kind of boxing intelligence, those kind of fighters. Not necessarily that elite, Matt, but those kind of fighters, I think, to really embarrass Navarrete. And I think someday someone will, but they're going to have to be really good.
Oh, completely. Yeah, I won't be betting against him. And I didn't, incidentally. I didn't put any money on it. I don't know. Just, you know what it's like when you're picking fights and you go through a purple patch and you think you know it all, and then all of a sudden, no, you don't know anything. Nobody does, really.
Well, what we do know is coming up now, it's this week. And this week we take you back to the 4th of March, 2000 in Manila in the Philippines. And it's a relatively young, relatively raw Manny Pacquiao at Super Bantam making his way towards a title against the Australian Arnold Barretillo, who's very experienced. He'd been an Australian champion. He'd also fought for titles. And he'd gone the distance with Viana Bungo just a few years before this. The same Bungo who around this time would lose to Nassim Hamed. Pacquiao 27-2 at this particular point. Matt, when you look at Pacquiao, and obviously the TV pictures aren't particularly good, but I mean, Pacquiao looks like he's about 6 foot tall, doesn't he? He looks sort of lean and long and lanky. And that's obviously because of the shape and size of Barretillo. But it's just a really slight, slender, fragile in many ways looking Manny Pacquiao. And it wasn't one-way traffic in this fight. Just a couple of times throughout, ultimately Pacquiao win it. But the look, seeing Pacquiao at this stage of his career, before he became the sort of terror that he would become in sort of about 3 or 4 years' time. Matt, it was quite interesting.
It's a really interesting exercise to watch this. Not only watch it, listen to it. The commentary is worth your time alone. Talk about excitable. I think at one point they said this is like Hagler versus Hearns. Now there was a little bit of two-way action, but let's not be stupid about it. But I think kind of the turn. Those two commentators would not have been aware what they were witnessing. They would not have suspected that Pacquiao would go on to do what he achieved. And I suppose I thought to myself as I was watching it, there's a little lesson here that not to write fighters off if you're not wowed by them when they're 20-something fights into their career. Because the Pacquiao that we kind of all fell in love with a few years later just is barely recognisable from this guy in the ring. And the commentators as well were almost waiting for Pacquiao to fall apart. I think at one point they said he's allergic to body shots. And that is because this was his second fight back after he'd lost his WBC flyweight title to 3K Battery. And he was stopped with a body shot in the third round. So there was a perception here that Pacquiao is delicate, that all Barretillo's got to do is kind of land a good one downstairs and Pacquiao is going to crumble. But astonishing when you watch this with the knowledge of what he went on to be. As I say, listen to the commentary. The camera work might make you feel a little bit nauseous. It did me. They kind of start with like some weird angle from about 20 rows back and then go zooming into the ring.
Yeah.
And then within 10 years, Pacquiao would be the man in the sport.
Well, within 3 and 4, he'd be beating Barrera and nearly hammering Marquez. I mean, It's like night and day. You can't believe it's the same guy. Unbelievably, physically as much as anything else. So what a transformation from this night. And in truth, I thought he was stung a couple of times in the first 2 rounds, Pacquiao. You can see the sort of fast hands. You can see the nucleus of Pacquiao as he'd become, couldn't you? The fast hands, the swarm, the left hand in particular. But I thought, Matt, he got hurt with a right hand just before he stopped Barretillo. Because a big right hand, and he just stepped backwards and backed off Pacquiao. And you think, oh, hello. You could just be thinking about this. He could be in a bit of bother, and then suddenly he finds the right hook off the back foot, and that's it. And there's that cinematic delayed reaction as Barretillo feels the weight of the shot.
Yeah, I had to kind of wait for the replay to see what had caused that. It's like someone there was a sniper a few rows back has just shot him because he's not next to Pacquiao. The punch isn't obvious, but when you look at the replay, you can see that it's a delayed reaction, and he about 3 seconds later collapses. And you do wonder when you look at Pacquiao, there are times where he looks a little bit delicate, and you would have understood at the time why the commentators were saying what they were saying. So you do wonder how Pacquiao did grow into be the fighter that he did and go through the weights, and to appear far more durable and stronger later in his life.
Indeed. Yes, literally chalk and cheese. It's like a remarkable case study to go back and watch him on this particular night, even with that grainy footage. Eventually, that big right hook stopping Baratillo in 4 rounds, and Pacquiao maybe coming slightly from the brink to win that one. Thanks to the lovely Patreons. Thanks to you for your continued support for less than $5 a month. The Patreon app or patreon.com, you can support the pod. It's the only reason, alongside NAS Medical, our sponsors, the only reason we're able to produce the pod each and every week and continue in truth is because of the Patreons. So if you can support us, then please do. That would be greatly appreciated. And also to our sponsor, NAS Medical, who specialize in complete medical coverage for boxing events. That includes Fight Night, ringside medical care, ringside medicine training courses, and also expert second opinions on all aspects of boxing-related medical matters. Boxer safety is their priority. And you can find them on Instagram at NAS Medical Limited or online, nasmedical.co.uk. Thanks to all the team for their continued support. Check us out on the socials. Follow us if you can. And we'll be back again to do it all again next week. Take care. Bye for now. What a game. What a game.